So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we're going to give you more of an updated review of the Talaria R Pro. Now we've had more of a chance to look at it, and we put it next to the current offerings of Talaria MX off-road bikes. So we've got the X3, the standard R, and then the R Pro. There was the Sting, standard Sting, which would sort of go between these two. That's no longer available. Obviously, there are a whole raft of other bikes that are in this space now. So there's RFN, there is R Pro, which is available in the UK, and obviously Surron. But we thought we'd just lay them out side by side as far as Talaria goes and help you in your research. So let's get to it. Okay, so we did do a sort of quick review of this bike when we were down at the importers review day. But now we've got these bikes in just before they go out again, actually. We thought we'd give you a bit more of a in-depth review of what's the differences between certainly the Sting R and now the new one, the R Pro. But just to sort of help out, these are the three current off-road Talarias that are available. Obviously, there are other brands to consider. We did a RFN review last week. Obviously, there's the Surron, there's R Pro that's now in the UK. There's also the KFN over there. But these are the sort of current lineup of Talaria off-road, so we thought we'd start with these. So the sort of entry-level bike is the X3. Now, the key thing about the X3 that most people will probably want to consider is that the battery is fixed. Okay, so in there, you can get it out if you had to, but not on a sort of day-to-day basis. You can drop the actual rear swing arm and then the battery sort of slides out the bottom. But as I said, it's not something you can do on a daily basis. So some people will almost have to dismiss that because of having a fixed battery and no easy way to charge it. But, you know, it's a good entry-level bike. It's only £3,000, goes 47 miles an hour in the de-restricted off-road form. Smaller, 17-inch wheels versus the 19-inch wheels of the Rs and the R Pro, but obviously lighter too. So it only weighs 58 kilos. 58 kilos is nothing. I mean, the R, the one in the middle there, is 66. But you know, for the power that you're talking about, you're getting a lot of power for the weight. You know, we're talking about 2.5 continuous and 5 kilowatts max in something that only weighs 58 kilos. So these things are light, they are agile, they can do jumps and all that sort of stuff. And that's just in the entry-level bike. So then we come on to the Sting R. So a bit of history. The first Talaria that came out was called the Sting. It was sort of a head-to-head comparison with the Light B. Similar sort of power, speed, weight. As I've said before, Talaria guys are ex-Surron guys, so they sort of took the Surron idea and, in my opinion, improved upon it, which I will go into a bit more in a little while. And that was the standard Sting. Then there was a road legal one. They've dropped the standard Sting now because the R has come out. Okay, so we've gone from 6 kilowatts of the Sting to now 8 kilowatts of the R. Now, again, 8 kilowatts, you're talking over 11 horsepower in something that just weighs 66 kilos. Okay, so again, very easy to sort of fly off the handle with it. Very good for jumps and all this sort of off-road stuff. But of course, there's always room for improvement. So if we go to some of the comparisons of the actual functionality, one of the first things to talk about is actually the drivetrain. So if you look at an X3, what you'll see is the motor comes out here and there's a little pulley, and that goes to swap the power to this side where the actual chain is. Okay, so that is transmission of power, and in my book, that's not as good as direct drive. That's how Surrons work as well. So, and R Pros actually. So you're taking the power from the left-hand side of the bike, transmitting it to the right-hand side of the bike, and then onto the chain. Nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's not as efficient, in my opinion, as something like direct drive. So here we have direct drive. You've got the actual motor coming directly to the chain and then back to the actual rear part of the bike. So on the R and the Pro, that's how it works. Okay, so if you look at the R as well, or the R Pro rather, you'll see exactly the same thing. One of the first differences to point out is, that we can point out, is the chain. So here you've got the chain on the R Pro, much more substantial, if you can see that there. And also you'll notice down here, you've got a chain guard, okay, on the lower part of the bike, no chain guard on these ones. And that's obviously to protect the chain when you're going over jumps and things like that, okay? So that's that. The next, or the main biggest difference between these two bikes, between the R and the R Pro, is actually the power. So, as I said, you've got 5 kilowatts out of the X3, you've got 8 kilowatts out of the R, but you've got 13, about, depending on who you read, out of the Pro. 13 kilowatts is, you're talking about 17 horsepower out of something that still only weighs 76 kilos. Okay, so it's a massive amount of power for its weight. Okay, so this bike does fly off the handle. Obviously, we've ridden it, we've sold some, but it is something that you would have to get used to. There are 3 modes on the bike. One is called H, which we'll come on to in a sec, and that is called hyper mode, where you get the full power, unrestricted, and off it will shoot. Okay, but we'll come back to looking at that in a minute. So we've talked about the sort of back end, some more stuff about the back end. So here you see, because of this more powerful bike, they've upgraded the brakes, okay, and they've also made a bigger, more substantial disc. You might not get that from this video, but if you actually look at the discs here, you'll see that it's more substantial on this with upgraded calipers. What they've also done at the front end as regard brakes is these master cylinders, if you can read that, now says it takes .3, .4, which is again more of a vehicle class of oil to go into a brake setup, whereas this one and this one are using mineral oil. Okay, so .3, .4 are more that commonly found in vehicles, motorbikes, etc. Better in general for heat dissipation and things like that. So they have upgraded the brakes in all guises. Okay, a few other things as we're at the front here. So brake levers, you've got adjustable brake levers, which you don't have on the R. What you'll often find is that people take these bikes and upgrade them. But essentially, what the Pro has done is done that for you. Okay, so often people will buy a Surron, a Talaria, say, well, we want more power out of it, so we'll add on, a 12 kilowatt controller, upgrade the battery, and they spend thousands of pounds doing so. Upgrade the brakes to maybe Maguras, etc., etc. But what Talaria have basically done is they've sort of done that for you, and for £4,895. So that is £1,100 more than the Sting R, but it's probably worth it if you actually try to do these upgrades yourself. Okay, so that's brakes, that's the rear end belt and motor. As I said, we're talking 5 kilowatts, 8 kilowatts, and now 13 kilowatts. Some other smaller things that they've done. If you notice here, they've got more substantial foot pegs. The X3 and the R are basically the same, just different color. And now they've gone for these more substantial ones. They say in the spec that the suspension, the rear shock, has been upgraded, but it doesn't look like it to me. Maybe internally there's something different about it, but still substantial and a good amount of compression available for you for when you're doing your jumps. Some of the similarities are obviously wheel sizes are the same on these two. There's a lot of front end similarities, so you've got same lights, same dash, other than it does different things. The forks are more substantial on the Pro. They have been upgraded. But of course, as people know, when they buy these things in Surrons, etc., you can go for Fox 40s or get more substantial racing grade forks if you wanted to. But as I said, they're sort of trying to sort of say, well, you don't need to do all that. This bike will be good enough. Some other little things on here, they've decided to give you a removable lid to get you into the battery. Whereas on the standard one, you actually, it flips. So you have to do this. Okay, it just does that. Whereas on the Pro, you can actually remove it. That's to help you get the battery out. I mean, generally these bikes can be a little bit fiddly in terms of getting the batteries in and out of the bike. That. So the dashboards are pretty much the same across both bikes, other than this bike now has an extra mode called H, hyper mode. And essentially the way you see that is through this button here. So economy, sport, and hyper mode, and that will essentially give you full access to all the power. And this menu system here also allows you to look at certain things around the bike. So for example, you can look at data. So maximum speed, 61. Obviously the standard R has a sort of 55 mile an hour limit. Odometer, so your total distance covered, etc., etc. Here you can set wheel sizes if you change the wheels to smaller, in this case. Battery information. So they talk about a 40 amp hour battery, where in actual fact this says 38.1. 83 volts is its maximum voltage output, and things like that. Units, imperial metric, etc., etc. Okay. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so batteries. So on the X3 and the standard R, they are 60 volt batteries, and on the Pro, it's a 72 volt. As you know, 72 volt batteries, or the higher the voltage, the more acceleration you get, and that is why this thing will literally fly off the handle. But when it comes down to range, what you're looking at is actually the amp hours times the volts. So on the R, you've got 60 by 45, which is 2.7 kilowatt hours. And on the Pro, you've got 72 by 40, which is 2.8 kilowatt hours. So in other words, 100 watt hours difference. Now, on paper, they say that the range is the same. I would find it hard to believe, unless, of course, you're riding and consuming the same amount of power. If you're literally flooring this one, or flooring versus flooring the R, you would get obviously a different amount of range, because this one is consuming up to 14 kilowatts, 13.4 kilowatts of energy, and that one's only consuming 8. So the net is, don't necessarily expect more range just because this has got a bigger battery. It is about the multiplication of volts and amp hours. Okay, and if you've only added 100 watt hours more of energy, but you've added the potential of 6 kilowatts of power, don't expect the same amount of range. Okay, especially if you're going, 60 miles an hour. Okay, so the charger on the Pro is now 15 amp, and that means that the battery charging is 3 hours. Okay, it is actually about that on the other two. It's just that because the capacity is greater, you would expect the charging time to be longer, but because they've upgraded the charger, essentially the charging time remains the same. The charger doesn't seem to be compatible between this one and the other two, whereas on these two, the charger is the same. Okay, so that's that. So we've talked about some specific features: charging time, power, range, speed, dimensions. Price 4,895 for the Pro, 3,795 for the R, and just 3,000 for the X3. Hopefully you see that the extra money is worth it on the Pro, because you're taking a lot more power in this bike, and they've upgraded the bits around it to support it, especially the brakes and drivetrain and things like that. The only other thing really is that the color is either this color or this highlight is in red. Available to test ride from us, obviously available to order. And hopefully that you found that useful. If you'd like any more information, please feel free to contact us. And thanks very much.